New areas of interest in the Eastern Pacific bear monitoring this week. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for May 24th. Right now, we've still got a blank screen on the main overview panel here. That's because we've got no active tropical cyclones, and the ones that we were looking at days and days ago now on my last personal update are long gone. So no tropical cyclones active. And in the Atlantic, it's a pleasant surprise to see that there's no areas of interest there either. With 8 days now until hurricane season, it could be another wild ride with Force 13's next forecast coming up on the 31st during our big countdown stream. Well, in the Eastern Pacific though, we do have something that's rather predictable, two areas of interest, but interesting to see them nonetheless, a 10% and a 30% by our estimates at the moment. We've gone slightly lower than the National Hurricane Centre's forecast because of less certainty, plus 50% chance on the eastern one, and in the Western Pacific we've got nothing to mark here either just now, so another quiet section here. And interesting to note that so far this year we're running at 77% of the expected energy from cyclones so far than what you get on average, so that's quite a bit below average, and nothing going on in the North Indian Ocean basin either. Which means that the most exciting area of the world right now is the Eastern Pacific, where most storms stay out at sea. And here's a close-up right now of that zone where you can see two distinct areas of convection, although out of this one only one potential system will arrive. The one further east will come from the right hand side of the image off screen over Central America, and then potentially become something south of the eastern part of Mexico at a higher latitude as well, further north than that blob on the right hand side, and we'll examine that later. Let's take a look at wider scale satellite imagery. Here is the North Atlantic right now, generally dryness over the central regions, but convection blowing up all across the Greater Antilles, and some bits spilling up into the United States, and indeed what was that area of interest yesterday moving well inland. And here's the Eastern Pacific, and that's a wider shot of those big areas of convection. You're seeing it starting to churn up, but anything that does try to form will be battling against a copious amount of dry air, as is always the case with the early season storms, which is why it's quite rare to see them start strong, at least straight on the A name. The Western Pacific there looking rather quiet, although you can see a little bit of rotation there in the South China Sea. That's something the GFS was picking up on a few days ago, although it doesn't look like it will amount to anything now. I think that the frontal areas north of there will take hold. Indian Ocean, you can see another area of rotation that's moved its way into Myanmar, but apart from that, nothing else going on, and apologies once again for the slight glitchiness there. Not sure why that's the case. I don't think we have enough images racked up to fill a whole loop. And this is the sort of South Pacific region visible there. Nothing going on right now. You can see a few little thunderstorms, well, quite large thunderstorms actually blowing up in the equatorial zones. But generally nothing organised, certainly, in that region. I think the southern hemisphere is done. Looking at the Eastern Pacific sea surface temperatures then, they're good to go for these two potential cyclones, 30 degrees plus even for both of those systems. The Atlantic zone there, not as warm, but still getting there, pushing 28 degrees, particularly in the Western Caribbean, along the Bahamas and even the southwestern part of Florida. Out to sea, temperatures are still taking their time to get there, but certainly a decent looking Gulf Stream there. Indian Ocean, very warm, pushing 30 degrees. South China Sea still has some way to go, especially in the north, in getting those temperatures up. You can see even as far south as Hong Kong, temperatures are only barely marginable for cyclone development. Out in the open ocean though, it's much better, 30 degrees in some areas there I think, but generally 28 degrees as a whole over the Philippine Sea. So temperature's decent there, as you would expect at this point in time. Well, how does it all compare to anomalies? Well, here it is. The South China Sea, that northern area that's cold, is actually cold on average by some distance when you look at that. La Nina is quite clear to see, although the eastern part of the eastern Pacific is trending above average, so you may get to see a little bit more activity there. If it obviously dry air, I think, will be the biggest issue right now. In the Atlantic, the oceanic heat content continues to build, extending into that loop current in the Gulf of Mexico now. Eastern Pacific, if anything, tracks over that big red blob. It's a fairly specific place, but that would be your place to see a rapidly intensifying storm, I would say. Western Pacific's got plenty of that though, as is normal. Computer models then, let's take a look at these two systems. This is what the GFS predicts from both of them. The one on the left that tries to form and moves eastward first and then westward, and then late in the 5-day period you get that second one forming. This is what the National Hurricane Center has marked as 40%, wrapping itself together and becoming actually a rather large tropical cyclone in that 5-day period. Winds at the end of the 120 hours probably getting to around 50 miles per hour. So that is something to watch, although the Eastern Pacific, we know that it can underperform sometimes, and I wouldn't put a huge amount of support into it just yet. Western Pacific, something that we're looking at here, just at the end of that 5-day period, you can see something trying to form. There it is, a little circulation trying to get itself established. Well, in the early days of that, there's really not much to look at all. Looking rather calm across the Micronesian areas towards the Philippine Islands. At the end of that 5-day period there, you can start to see it form. Looking at longer range, this is 5 to 10 days. Looking first at the Western Atlantic, GFS predicts that a system will move off Cuba and the Bahamas. Where is it? There it is, I think, and yep, tries to become a tropical cyclone. Whether it makes it or not, it probably doesn't, looking at that imagery. But those are the kinds of things we look out for in the early season. This is what we would expect could become a tropical cyclone and the first named storm, but we've not got there yet. 5 to 10 days for the Eastern Pacific. You can see that becomes a significant hurricane and then hits Mexico, at least Category 2 range there on the GFS. It's been hovering from Category 2 all the way up to Category 4 in the last few runs. And you can see there later on in that imagery, watch again and look towards the southern Gulf of Mexico after that landfall. Little shades of maybe 2020 or something like that, tries to reform and then make landfall and moving back over land again. Goodness me. Watching that depression again in the Western Pacific, 5 to 10 days, there it is, becoming a short-lived tropical storm, rather weak, and then shooting off towards the north. We'll see whether that actually transpires. My guess right now, the GFS, probably not. But there it is once again, and following it this time a little bit further north there, it holds on to itself a little bit longer. Whether it's tropical or not by that point remains to be seen. That's all the important stuff out the way. You can find our merch store on Force 13 by scanning that code there, or by visiting the link underneath our video. We now do animations up on offer on there as well. Now the Silly range in the Atlantic. Well, let's see what happens next. That system moving up the Western Atlantic moves into Nova Scotia as post-tropical cyclone. They have this big mess that's moving through here, tries to become tropical at first and maybe is still trying there at that point, almost reaches hurricane status. So a lot happening there in the Atlantic over that 6-day period from day 10 to 16, and you can see there probably a tropical cyclone moving into Cuba, and then it sort of loses its way, and it's hard to see whether that actually retains tropicality or not, but my guess would probably not, and it really doesn't matter anyway because it's way out in the forecast. On this day, May 24th, 2001, it was alone, but it was very strong, a Category 4 Cyclone 1B, because they didn't name them back then, in the North Indian Ocean, and it looked pretty beautiful as well when you look at that imagery. And that storm, I believe, was the one that became a threat to Gujarat in western India and caused significant damage, if that's the one I'm thinking of. but certainly threatened that coastline as a pretty strong cyclone. Adolf was about to form in the Eastern Pacific as well on this day that year. Back to this year, and we haven't had any activity in the Western Hemisphere yet, unless you count the South Atlantic. Alex is the first name on the North Atlantic naming list. In the Eastern Pacific, the first name is Agatha, and in the Central Pacific, no Hone jokes tonight. In the Western Pacific, the next name on the list is Chaba, and in the North Indian Ocean, it's Sitrang, followed by Mandus, if it gets there anytime soon. And in the Australian region, the next name would be Darien, the Southwest Indian Ocean, Leth Lama if anything happens before the end of June, and in the South Pacific, the next name is Hale. That's all for now. We'll have another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow night.